On, everybody? Welcome into American Football Network. Hope you guys are doing good today. We're also live on the Podcast Boys Network, so check us out over there on Twitter and YouTube as well as Facebook. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Also, comment those thoughts and opinions down below. Help us reach our goal of 1,300 subscribers by the end of February. We're only about, I believe, 47 away, so let's get going on that. Let's hit that goal. Also, check out the description where you'll find links to our podcast website, shop, and our Patreon page. But let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get started with today's video. So, today we are discussing the news that broke yesterday. Steve Wilkes was fired just 3 days after the Super Bowl as the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator. And the big question surrounding this firing of Wilkes is Shanahan really just using him as the scapegoat for the loss in the Super Bowl and what kind of fell apart? Has that been is that why he was fired? And there's a lot of people that'll tell you yeah, there's a lot of people that'll tell you no. Personally, I think it's somewhere in the middle. Um you look at Wilkes and what they were wanting out of him. Or really, let me back up. You start with Shanahan's press conference yesterday, and he said Steve Wilkes is everything we were looking for as a man. And he paused for a second, and then he said, and he's a great football coach too. He didn't say he's what we were looking for in a football coach, and I think that that's part of it. I think that you look at the style of defense and the scheme that Robert Saleh ran, you look at what D'Amico Ryans ran, and it's completely different from what Steve Wilkes ran. You also look, Saleh and Shanahan had been together for a little while. They had a good relationship. When Saleh left to be the head coach of the Jets, Shanahan promoted D'Amico Ryans from within. All right. Well, they also had a good relationship. He'd worked under him for a while as a position coach. He promoted him from within to be the defensive coordinator. Well, when Ryans left to go be the head coach of Houston, Shanahan went outside the building and hired Steve Wilkes, and that was also kind of the first time he'd done that. But again, he didn't run the same. He didn't really run the same style of defense that those other two guys had ran. And whenever you look at some of the other issues that they had, Steve Wilkes wanted to be in the booth. Players complained about communication, wanted him down on the field. And I think the biggest thing that was kind of the last straw for it was when you go back and you watch the Super Bowl and you look in overtime. Believe the Chiefs are around midfield. I think it's a second and six. I was just watching it earlier, prepping for the video. Believe it was a second and six, and the Niners have 5 men back playing cover zero, and Shanahan calls a timeout. He's like, "No, we're not doing that. I'm not trying to tell you how you're jobbing them, but we want, we need a different play call." He wanted to bring pressure, and Wilkes was dropping back, and so I think that right there was just kind of the the telling of why of when it was going to be that he was going to be fired. That they just really weren't um really weren't getting along too well and didn't really see eye to eye on a lot of things. But and not only that, you just look not just defensive coordinators, but Steve Wilkes is the first outside of the building coordinator that Shanahan has hired, offensive or defensive. Um, and so you look at the numbers because I do think it was a little bit of a scapegoat. I think if they win the Super Bowl, Steve Wilkes isn't fired yesterday. I think that there's that. I don't think they fire him yesterday if they win the Super Bowl, but I think that in losing that's kind of what happened. But when you look at their numbers this year defensively, they were eighth in the NFL in yards allowed per game. You look at through the air, the secondary was a pretty big weakness for them, but it still wasn't killing. They were just over the top half, just barely in the top half of that, around the middle point of the league, averaging 214.2 pass yards allowed a game. And when you look at the rushing yards a game, they were actually third in the NFL, just behind the Bears and the Lions. The Bears at 86.4, Lions 88.8, Niners 89.7. And when you look at points allowed per game, San Francisco right there at third behind Baltimore and Kansas City. The Ravens averaged 16.5 points allowed a game, Chiefs at 17.3, and the Niners at 17.5. So this in no way was a bad defense trend by Wilkes. I just don't think it's what Shanahan wanted. I don't think it's really what the players wanted, what they felt fit them the best. I don't think it's the scheme that Shanahan wanted to run. And so that leads us into the next conversation as who's going to be the guy that replaces Steve Wilkes as the defensive coordinator. Does Shanahan promote from within? If he goes that route, you have a guy like Johnny Holland, the 49ers linebacker coach. He got the San Francisco in 2017 when Shanahan first arrived. He's been there since him. He's been under both Robert Sala and D'Amico Ryans. So he knows the defense and the style of defense that they want to run. He knows a lot of these players if they've had a lot of them for a while. Um, Another guy is Daniel Bullock's the 49ers secondary coach. He's also been there since Shanahan's first season. And he's also been under Robert Sala and D'Amico Ryans. He also knows that. When you look at when you look at guys who have worked with Shanahan, but not necessarily inside the building, another guy's Corey Undlin, the Houston Texans defensive pass game coordinator. He spent 2 seasons with the Niners and then left with D'Amico Ryans. But the guy that I'm really looking at is, I don't think you've heard his name a lot, and he's a guy because he's a former head coach. You're gonna hear his name a lot, um, and a guy who I don't necessarily think is gonna be somebody who is gonna take the job or really the first look at. But it is possible, and I think Brandon Staley is another guy that Shanahan will look at. Um, Shanahan interviewed Vic Fangio I believe it was actually last year, and they weren't on the same page as far as the schemes go. But Staley is a Vic Fangio disciple, and so it seems like they would talk with him a little bit. You look at with Brandon Staley, he was with Vic Fangio whenever they tried to go after and get him, and so this is possible that they look at Staley because they were looking at him the same time they were looking at Vic Fangio, and they tried to get Staley in 2017. So I think Staley's another guy they look at. But if I had to pick who's going to be it, I would between Daniel Bullock's the secondary coach for the Niners and Johnny Holland, their linebacker coach. Those guys have been there since day one with Shanahan, and it's guys that are very familiar with the system and the scheme that Shanahan is wanting to run. The same thing that Robert Sala and D'Amico Ryans ran. So I think that'll be between those two guys who ends up getting the job. But that's just my thoughts on Steve Wilkes firing and what happens. Let me know down below in the comments. Do you think he was fired just because they didn't like his performance, the scheme fit, whatever? Do you think that Shanahan and the Niners are using Steve Wilkes as the scapegoat? Let me know down below. Again, help me hit that goal of 1,300 subscribers by the end of February. We appreciate all you guys watching, and we will see you next time.